Okay, Leslie's running a few minutes late, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'm going to call for the adoption of the agenda.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
All in favor? The agenda has been adopted. And, okay, so the first item is the ethics ordinance discussion. Since it's a discussion, would anyone like to start?
How about you, Kevin?
Oh, it's Stephanie's.
He's our noble leader.
All right. I think I've just been voluntold to come up here. So, what do we have to pull up on the ethics? Yeah, all right. So, I guess since early this year, we've been having discussions about the ethics ordinance, the problems I think we all recognize with the ethics ordinance. I've had a number of phone calls, emails from people in the public that have the same concerns that I think we all have with the ethics ordinance, how it's made up, what they're empowered to do. So I think everyone is in agreement that a change needs to occur with the ethics ordinance. If I'm wrong about that, let me know, but I haven't had a single discussion that says they are happy with the ethics ordinance. Every discussion I've had has been more along the lines of dissatisfaction with the ethics ordinance. So I think this is the subject of an upcoming work session. Right now we're having a discussion which kind of violates what we discussed at the last work session about discussions without motions, but here's where we are. The current ordinance, as you know, and for the benefit of the public that may or may not know, the ethics board, or the entire ethics ordinance came into being a number of years ago. If you look around different cities, there's a very similar ethics ordinance in the different cities, and it's similar because GMA promoted this to become a city of ethics. You had to adopt an ethics ordinance, and they provided a sample ordinance. So that gets you a certificate on the wall. And as we're realizing, it creates some issues. But the way it's made up currently is the mayor appoints a person, council appoints one person, and the mayor nominates a person that has to be approved by council. And these are the people that will hear ethics complaints made against not only mayor and council, but other officers, employees of the city, board members of the city. So you're kind of picking and packing your own judge and jury in the way it's set up. And I think all of us understand that that does not give comfort to the person making the complaint, that their complaint will be fairly considered. There is an automatic perception of bias, whether there's an actual bias or not. So I think we all recognize that. So we've got, if we're going to keep an ethics ordinance, I think we all agree that there needs to be some changes. And just to start, and I'm not promoting any of these options, I'm just saying these are options. Option one would be to continue with what we got. Option two is to scrap it all together and start off with a new ordinance, or scrap it all together and not have an ordinance. And the problem with that third one is politically it sounds bad. It sounds like we're no longer going to be ethical. But the reality of the situation is, if you look at what are considered ethics violations in the city, there are other legal recourses to address all of those issues. If they're dealing with money, usually it could be a criminal matter. But there are other avenues to address, and in fact, our ethics ordinance talks about that. Nothing in this ordinance prevents someone from seeking other avenues of relief if there are others. I think the most difficult part's going to be to decide how to make up the actual ethics board if we continue. There are various options out there. I think you guys have seen a review of one that our office prepared for the city of Rome, which appoints an attorney that does not live in the city, that is basically the ethics board. That's good. It addresses a lot of concerns that I've heard. Lawyers themselves it's a heavily governed, regulated practice. You can't become a lawyer without going through a criminal background check. If you commit a crime of moral turpitude while you are a lawyer, you're likely to lose your bar license. So that addresses a lot of concerns I heard that we're not doing background checks on the people. The problem with that route is expense. I mean, you could easily spend $10,000 or more per complaint by the time a lawyer does an investigation. Right now, we're relying on volunteers. So there's going to be problems with whatever route we take. But, you know, another thing to consider is a temporary moratorium on just accepting complaints until we can fix it, because any complaints now would need to proceed pursuant to the ordinance we have now. So if we had other complaints that are filed, they're going to be heard by the people that are appointed the way our ordinance reads right now, and in the manner that it will proceed in the manner that's under the ordinance. So, you know, if we go that route, we need to be prepared to meet soon and take action soon. But I guess that's my opening for the discussions. I'm happy to try to answer questions, or hear from council any direction they want to give, I guess, staff on how you would like us to proceed.
You're saying be sued for.
I'm not
if
talking.
you don't.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it's on.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
You go ahead, because I may not.
The last statement you made, you said, "Oh, we could be sued." So I'm saying sued for.
I don't think.
Or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, I don't think I said we could be sued.
Oh,
We should act soon. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh, soon.
Act soon.
Okay, all right, I'm
SOON. We can be sued. We're always sued.
Ooh, that's not.
So.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, my point is, you know, I think we need to do something soon, in the near future.
So
And that's
what
separate
happens-
from item number 2 on the agenda. I think we need to deal with that today, but as far as changes to the ordinance, we need to act soon.
So if we've got something now, then we would have to use the old ordinance as a guideline as to what, and then you're saying that, I know I might be jumping ahead because I have to ask it when I think about it. But so if something comes up after that, then the new ordinance, if we do one, that would have to go under that.
Yes, if generally in any type of offense or when you're applying a law to some type of action, you're going to apply to the law that's in place at the time that the action is filed. Okay? There are exceptions to that, especially when we get into procedural matters, but substantive matters, we usually have to follow the law that was in place at the time that the complaint or any action was filed. So that's why I'm saying we need to, we all understand what we have now is not good. It's not going to make the person filing the complaint feel that their complaint's being taken serious, even if it is. It just has that perception. So we need to do something before others are filed.
Yes.
Can I address the act soon? I just wanted to throw out there, if the discussion leads to direction this evening, is that not something that could be heard Tuesday at our regular meeting, if we can?
Well, it depends on what the action is. Yeah, sure.
Oh, yes, Councilman.
So I guess, Kevin, my question is going to be, you already explained that everything under the ethics ordinance could basically the way we talk about it is cumulative, right? The ethics ordinance is cumulative in that anything, you can bring a complaint under the ethics ordinance, but you can also file a lawsuit against whomever you have a grievance with and sue them for that malfeasance, or you can file a police report for theft of funds, or you can do all this stuff here on the ethics ordinance side, but you can also do it, there's other avenues in which to pursue it under laws, right? So I guess if somebody files a grievance under the ethics ordinance and it is determined whether under our existing ethics ordinance, under any revised ethic ordinance that we come up with or not, what is the worst case scenario for the person that's being complained against? Can they be, does the ethics ordinance provide that they can be removed from office, whether it's a city employee or a council person or a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission or whomever?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We cannot draft an ethics ordinance that would provide for the removal of office of an elected official. The ethics ordinance as it stands has a provision that there can be a recommendation that that person resign from office, but no one can force them to do that. You're elected for a term and you'll serve that term unless there's some other ability to either recall you or some other actions taken legally. But an ethics violation can never result in an elected person in and of itself losing their seat. Other appointed, like committee members, this council already has the authority to remove appointed officers and committees already. This board already has the authority outside of the ethics ordinance to conduct investigations. So cumulative is a good word. And the power to actually discipline is very limited no matter what we do. A public reprimand is about as bad as it's going to get as far as discipline.
So that's as far as the teeth of any ethics ordinance, whether it's the one we have now or any future one, the teeth is that make a recommendation. That's all can really be done, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And even when it becomes before council to actually take action on it, I'm talking the teeth are asking someone to resign or reprimanding them.
Right.
Whereas if someone felt that you voted on something and had a conflict of interest, there may be another legal avenue to set aside that decision. An ethics complaint will not be able to set aside that decision.
Right. Right. If there's a legal challenge to a decision made, that can't be exercised through an ethics complaint. It has to be filed with the courts.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Drummond, question, if there was an ethics complaint against an employee, how does that mesh with the fact that we have management that will, that deals with an employee indiscretion or hiring or firing or that type of thing. How does that, I mean, somebody could make an ethics complaint, but at the same time, usually discipline things for an employee or firing occurs on the staff level.
Yeah. If there's an ethics complaint against an employee, again, at the end of the complaint, even if it was found that an ethics violation had occurred, all you can do is make a recommendation. I mean, the employee has the right, according to the employee handbook, to go through that process for any discipline that the city takes against that employee.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes,
I mean, I guess to
Councilman.
kind of piggyback off that question, I mean, oftentimes personnel matters are confidential, right? So,
Right.
I mean, how does that
So-
weigh in with a public ethics process and a confidential personnel matter?
Yeah, that's another good question, and one that I've had to do some research about Open Meetings Act, because it's not addressed in the ordinance. It's not addressed in any ordinances that I can tell, and there's not any really reported cases on it. But I think when the ethics board meets, the initial meeting would be a open meeting, subject to the Open Meetings Act. If they start talking about there are certain matters they would have to go into executive session to discuss. The ultimate hearing on discipline, which I don't think they have the authority to do, but if hearings on discipline are open to the public,
Okay.
but then they don't have the authority to discipline, so.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? Yes, Councilman McCoy.
I was just going to say that my filter's not going to work. This seems like absolutely redundant. It seems like an ordinance that does absolutely nothing. That there's I'll wait for the train. I don't think redundant's the right word, but I think everybody understands what I'm saying. This seems like an absolutely useless, maybe a better word, ordinance to have. That no matter what we do, that we could get Supreme Court judges on here. It's not going to do anything. We could get Bozo the Clown on here. It's not going to do anything. It's just basically going to be a reprimand, and that's it. And then it's really, I mean, they have no real power. It's just they're kind of passing information along. This seems like the only thing it could possibly be used for is for like political games. I mean, am I wrong?
It's subject to abuse.
Okay, that's a better way of saying it.
They would issue a report, I would imagine, so there would be a record of their findings. But that's pretty, in a recommendation, and that's about it, so.
So at the end of the day, it's useless.
I guess someone could say there's value in that report, but I think all the concerns I'm hearing are valid concerns. It is subject to abuse. It has no real teeth. It is, I think I've described it as feel-good legislation earlier, that it's something that they ask you to pass so you can put a certificate on your wall.
Exactly.
I was just asking him, so what's the use of having it? He said, just like you said, it's just be a certificate on the wall. So we just doing what?
I mean, our ethics are in our charter. Well, we got them in our charter, and then we've got them in the ethics ordinance. But there are ethics in our charter that aren't going to go away no matter what happens with the ethics boards.
Well, let me ask this, and so I guess we talked about, I mean, it sounds to me like if we did not have an ethics ordinance, then we no longer get to have that cool certificate from GMA saying that we're a city of ethics, for one. But beyond that, I mean, is there any kind of funding that's tied into having an ethics ordinance? Like you can't get state funding or federal funding or something like that?
No, and I imagine that pretty certificate's expired by now.
Fair enough. Okay.
Let me make sure I got this straight, Kevin. Is your recommendation to enact a moratorium and rework the ethics ordinance, or is it to do away with it? What is your recommendation?
I think I started that I wasn't promoting any of those, but
To get one out of him, right?
I don't see any value in an ethics ordinance, the way, at least this type of ethics ordinance. Politically, it sounds bad that you're doing away with an ethics ordinance, but the reality of the situation, it gives the public nothing. I mean, they have other means of address that are more powerful and have more teeth than proceedings, especially the way the current one's set up, so.
So we were represented here with a moratorium, 60-day moratorium suggestion.
That's one option that I prepared. I think y'all probably saw a copy of a ordinance from another city. I've had conversations with other organizations or people that if we're going to maintain an ethics board, whether they could serve as that. Councilman Montmahan will be familiar with the mediation center, that people there could possibly, outside of the city be available. They've got a facility. They've got people on staff that are reasonably priced. They haven't said they would do it, but I've had that, at least had that conversation. So it's kind of whatever this council, or at least a majority of you, which direction you want to go, and then we can draft the legislation that leads us in that direction.
Okay, let me clarify here. If we already have an ethics complaint filed, then we have to proceed with the old ordinance. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we've got to create the ethics board. We've got to get the 3 members on board for an ethics committee to move forward. But we do have to proceed with, if one's already been filed, I understand one has.
We've got a document that's called an ethics complaint, and I think we need to proceed on it. And it would proceed under what is currently in place.
Yes, Councilman Warmoth.
But at the end of the day, there's no authority that this board has. So if, and I'm just speaking hypothetically, this board was just no more, what avenue would citizens take to file a complaint where they would feel like they received some sort of validity to it?
Depends on the nature of the complaint, and I'll try to give some examples. If the complaint was based on an alleged ethics violation that someone voted on approving money to be spent on something that they had a financial interest in, then they could file a lawsuit to set aside that vote, which is way more powerful than an ethics complaint that at the end of the day, the rest of you turn to that person and say, you shouldn't have done what you did. I mean, that's a public reprimand.
So you saying that's all you could do?
The worst you could do is you shouldn't have done what you did, and we want you to resign.
That's without the ethics board, then we could do this.
They can do it with or without.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. The ethics board does not prevent anyone from proceeding with any other legal avenue that they have.
So ordinarily, the ethics board can't make I mean, they can do recommendations from what they discuss in their meeting about this particular complaint.
Right.
But they can't, then the council would have to make the motion or the whatever. Just like the P and Z, they make recommendations to us and we vote on it.
Exactly.
So the ethics board, so what good is it?
But even still, it would be completely redundant because,
That's what I'm saying.
because
So what-
all we could do with that recommendation that were to come to us is a public reprimand, and we could, ask them to resign, but as an elected official, we cannot force any resignation.
Yeah.
It would take a recall
The most
from the citizens.
the most effective ethics measure is the ballot box. I mean, you vote against the person you think is not
Ethical.
acting ethical. So, I mean, that, you know, if it's criminal, that's different. Or if they're violating the law, then there's clearly legal actions that can be taken. But elections are much more effective than reprimands.
But if it's a citizen that filed a complaint, then, and they go to the ethics board, and then they come back to, then it comes back to the council, then we vote to do what? I mean, if it's,
You vote to say, Shirley, you shouldn't have done that. Shirley, you should have resigned.
no, I mean, I'm saying a person, a citizen, not
Sure.
not a,
No, I mean-
not a council member.
I know.
Not a,
Yeah, I'm saying is what the process is very similar to what you described. From what I understand from Kevin saying is that somebody files an ethics complaint, let's just say against me.
no. but-
No, just say you
Okay,
file an ethics
okay,
complaint against
I'm
me.
listening.
The board, this ethics board hears that complaint, and they say, we agree with the citizen, Mr. Momtahan did not act ethically. And then that board makes a recommendation to the council, and then the council says, well, we're gonna vote to accept the recommendation from the ethics board and give a public reprimand to Mr. Momtahan, or we're gonna vote to deny the recommendation from the ethics board and not give a public reprimand. Let's say y'all all agree to publicly reprimand me. Okay, well, you publicly reprimanded me. You slapped me on the hand. All right, but you can't remove me. Only the voters can do that. So that's the scenario. That's the worst y'all can do to anybody is public reprimand.
And if it's one of the members of our multiple boards, we already have the ability.
We already have
And if it goes beyond where it's something that's criminal, well then, you got to deal with it on that level. Yes, oh,
So I had two questions. They're not related. So the first question is, a couple of years ago, the governor removed the chairman of Douglas County and a couple of commissioner
Councilman.
members.
yeah.
But that was, how did that come about?
They
I
were
guess,
under
what do you
a
remember?
felony indictment.
So that was a criminal proceeding, nothing to do with ethics, right? All right, and then my second question is, if in the event that we do, for lack of a better description, outsource our ethics complaint to some lawyer or a mediation center or whatever it may be, who is in charge of paying for the fees incurred? Is that,
The taxpayers.
The city would probably be responsible, I mean, unless we charge a filing fee, which, if you file something in court, you're gonna pay a filing fee.
sure.
Um,
I guess my concern is if the city, if the complaint is against a member of the city or the city council, and the city is paying the person that's investigating it, they're paying their, salary or wage or however you want to describe it, then I don't know if that, I'm sure, I expect these folks to still act ethically in their consideration of an ethical complaint, but I still feel like people are going to get the impression, well, the city council's writing your check and the city council's investigating. You're investigating them. I don't know if that resolves concerns for folks. I don't know if it does, but that was just my thought. It seems like either the filer would have to pay a fee or be responsible, but then again, I guess then as a council, then we would be kind of concerned that, well, of course you're going to side with the person that, that's paid your fee. I don't know, but that's just kind of thinking out loud, so.
So what we can do today is to go ahead and put a moratorium on this for 60 days to where council can come back and discuss how we want to proceed with this ethics board, correct? And then that will stop any other complaints from coming in temporarily?
Yeah, it would, people could still file, we couldn't consider complaints until 60 days, during the moratorium. And so we wouldn't officially file them until the moratorium was lifted. And it may be less than 60 days. It may, it could be probably not going to be at the next council meeting, but it could be. But whenever council decided what they're going to do, then as soon as that happened, you could lift the moratorium.
And to clarify, our charter does not specify that an ethics board has to exist or how an ethics board is to operate. It is under GMA's, it's an ordinance through GMA, correct?
The ethics board is an ordinance not in the charter. Yes.
Right.
We have ethics in the charter, but separate, completely separate.
Right, but we have the ability to make changes to that ordinance
Yes,
quickly and easily.
yes.
Rather than with a change to the charter would be a completely separate process.
It is a different process.
Because I do believe that there is some misunderstanding in the community that this ethics board is in our charter. And I just want to make it clear that it is not in the charter. It is a separate ordinance. Understood that it's that we're required by law, this is our law, in order to have one as it's currently written, but we can make those changes.
Yeah, and just for the public's sake, when you say required by law, our ordinance is our law, so there's no.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Okay.
But people in the public may not, when they hear by
Okay.
law, there's not a Georgia law that says we have to have this ordinance. So I don't know that any city had it until GMA came up with it, so.
Councilman McCoy.
Thank you. So at this point in time, we have a complaint. It would have to go through the ethics board as it is now, correct? We have a complaint. If we put if by some miracle we had a special called meeting and put a moratorium on it on tomorrow or Monday, that complaint would still go through what we had, what our ethics ordinance was before.
Yeah, well, we cannot make changes that would be applied to what we currently received.
Okay.
We've received what someone's called a complaint. The ethics board can't consider a complaint until it's received in proper form. So there is a distinction there. But what we've received will proceed with what we've got now.
Okay, so unless the complaint is withdrawn or something, it sounds like what we should do is go with the ordinance as is, handle this complaint, but for anything future, put the moratorium on until we can tweak this to get it to something that is satisfactory, or even like we have more, because we talked about more discussion in another forum, is to be able to do that and come up with something that is much more palatable.
Yes.
So, seeing as it's 4:35, I would like to suggest we do that. So, that's the end of my discussion.
And as I understand it, we've already appointed 2 members to the board. We're only lacking the one that the mayor is appointing that we have to approve. That's the only one that's lacking. That constitutes the 3-member board.
Say what, Dan, what'd you say?
we've already gone through. We've got to do one more that she's gonna. We have completed 2 of the 3 member board.
We're still on one.
We approved one by the council, we approved one that she appointed. Now that she's gonna,
Voting on the one where she.
we've got one more to go.
I know we don't have a motion on the floor yet, to form a motion, but I would say, I'm just gonna put it out there that I don't think I'm inclined to put a moratorium on. I think this is the ordinance that we have for better or worse, and until we amend it in some way. At this point also, I understand that unfortunately, for better or worse, we have we have an ethics ordinance. At some point, we decided that. I don't know if I like the idea of even, repealing it entirely and not replacing it. I think it needs to be improved at some point, but I think this is just the ordinance we have, and we work through it for as long as we have it. Let's improve it, but I don't know if we should repeal it, and I'm not in favor of a moratorium. That's just my input right now.
I'm in favor of the moratorium. So if that's something that we could potentially implement today, I don't know if that was, I know it's not on the agenda. Oh, it is included in on there? So, I would be in favor of it. Again, if the ordinance, okay, if the ordinance is completely redundant anyways, then what does it hurt having the moratorium in place till we can take a better look at it and decide what we want to do as a council?
Can we go ahead and act on the moratorium at this time?
We would just need a motion one way or the
Yeah,
other,
we need a
We,
motion.
do we need to read the moratorium?
or put it on the screen, either one, or both. I may have revised that.
It's on the city clerk thing. Part of the discussion.
All right, let me just read, because this is close but not identical. Whereas the mayor and city council are in the process of reviewing the current ordinance that establishes a board of ethics and its powers and duties. Whereas the city shall consider whether or not to make changes to the existing ordinance as it relates to the composure of the board of ethics and their duties and powers. Now therefore be it hereby resolved and ordained that the city hereby adopts a moratorium for a period of 60 days from the date of this action to review and consider changes to the city ethics ordinance. During said moratorium, the city shall not accept nor consider ethics complaints. This moratorium shall not deprive any party of any action such party might otherwise have at law or in equity against any city official. This moratorium shall not, this is new, the moratorium shall not apply to any complaints received prior to the date of the enactment of this moratorium. This moratorium shall remain in effect until its expiration or further action by council.
Okay, I'll make that motion to that moratorium he just read out.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Motion passes 4-1.
And
Item
now,
2,
and now it's my understanding that we have to finish the completion of the third member of the board to hear the complaint that was received. Is that correct?
That's correct. The council's made their appointment, the mayor has made her appointment. The final would be someone recommended by the mayor that is approved by council.
And
And I think she's recommended Connie Flowers.
correct.
So,
okay,
I have a question. Now, if that person that she's not, that does not get the vote, then where do we go from there? I'm just asking.
Yeah. We're in uncharted territory. So my plan would be, we've appointed 2, so we've got a quorum. And I'm going to ask them to go ahead and proceed, whether we have a third or not.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve Connie Flowers as appointed by the mayor to the Villa Rica Board of Ethics.
We have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Do you want further discussion?
I didn't vote.
Okay, further discussion. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
I didn't vote.
Discussion.
Oh, I was waiting on you to go. I'm sorry, Miss Shirley. So, Miss Shirley, if it's any help for you, the moratorium's in place so that we can make those changes, without any additional complaints being received to that, ethics board. I mean, I'm sure that,
What's your question?
well, it's not a question, it's a discussion.
Okay.
Because I know that you had just mentioned that you were, that you had concerns, as far as this appointment. And again, it's just, this board as it sits right now will only handle the complaint that is currently into the city.
So after this is heard and settled by the one that we have now, then after we settle that complaint, then that board is no longer.
We can make that change, correct?
It depends on what y'all decide. I mean, y'all could decide you like what you got and you keep it. But I don't think y'all are going to decide that, but y'all.
And actually, there's no bylaws or anything for the board, so we don't specify a term for these members anyway.
Well, all appointments are for a year in the city unless we specify otherwise.
Is that somewhere in the charter?
Yeah, we voted on that a year or so ago, that all terms end December 31st unless the ordinance provides otherwise, like the planning and zoning, their terms are what Mr. Carter recommended. So, but otherwise, most boards, we need to appoint them annually.
Well, we still re-up them, but they go for 2 years on planning and zoning. It's an ongoing board. It
Right.
needs to be in progress.
Right.
Yes, Councilman McCoy.
I was like, might as well throw my hands up for fun. I was going to say, there's two things I wanted to say during this whole discussion is that I am not a big fan of ordinances that can not be enforced or aren't really properly enforced. I do feel like that's kind of government waste. That's just my personal opinion, that we're putting it on there just so everybody can feel warm and fuzzy. I do think that this needs to be taken a little more seriously, and at the end of the day, I think I meant to ask this and I forgot I asked it in my head, but at the end of the day, like, the only thing, Georgia law is we can only have a reprimand. No one has an ordinance in any city that's like, oh, if you find this, you're going to be removed, correct? Am I understanding you correctly? Might be, Mr. Drummond.
I don't think anyone could have an enforceable ordinance that says that.
Okay. That was my understanding. So I think that, we have, I was not here for the work session, but I think we have discussed this, and we've come up with an amicable solution for this, for the time being, and that it's not necessary, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, it is not necessarily someone cannot file a complaint, it's just not going to be heard. Someone could go file a complaint tomorrow, it's just not going to be heard for 60 days.
I mean, I guess it's technically not going to be filed during the moratorium.
Okay.
I mean, if they brought it by city council, we're not going to throw it in the trash can. We're just not going to officially file it until the moratorium's lifted.
Okay. So there's nothing stopping anyone, we're not.
No.
Councilman Warmoth.
So even if this person is not appointed with the two people that you have, you can already proceed and move forward with this complaint.
Yeah, I mean, it's an even number. You always want an odd number when you have to vote on things. So my recommendation and preference is that we fill all the positions.
Understood, because again, that's what the ordinance states. So I understand as the attorney, your job is to advise us as to what the law states. So I understand, but what I'm asking is that if this third person were not appointed, and you have one person that was approved by the council, and then you have one person that's approved by the mayor, then it's a fair game at that point. Whereas with the 3 members, then you once again have the mayor who has 2/3 control of this board. And I mean, I understand, and I said it earlier, so I'm not trying to contradict myself, but when we, yes, there may not be any real reprimand that would be, that they would be able to do. However, it's something that should be taken seriously, which is exactly what Ms. McCoy had said, is that, this is something that I feel like we should be taking seriously. This is something that the citizens should be taking seriously, and I appreciate the discussion with this, because we're talking about ethics complaints against elected officials or staff members. I mean, this is something we should be taking very seriously. So what I'm asking is that we could go ahead and move forward with only 2 and have it a fair playing field, so to speak,
Well, Ms.
and it wouldn't hold anything up. That's what I'm asking.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's beneficial to have 3 versus 2, I can change mine. But if it's, if it's got to be, where it won't be, as you say, 2/3, then
And Mr. Drummond had just mentioned as well that he would have a quorum with the 2 members and would go ahead and proceed with the current,
I know what I'm saying. Then if that leaves, then the power would be not to the council, but to the mayor.
with 2/3,
Then
yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
If that keeps it from that, then I'll go with the nomination or the suggestion, if that makes sense.
I understand what both of you are saying. My advice and recommendation is to fill a position as the ordinance requires.
If I can just I'm sorry, Kevin. As y'all were talking, I kind of thought about this. I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from about for lack of better terms or better description, the balance of power on this ethics board. But what are we going to do as a council if, first of all, if we come back with a tied 51 versus 1 recommendation? That's my first thought. I just don't think doesn't really give any guidance to us on whether we should do a public reprimand or not. And then the second thing is, and I don't know if that actually gives any kind of redress to the person that brought the complaint, because if the best they can get is a tie, I mean, they could get a 2-0, but if they get a tie, then were they really heard? Like, was a decision really made? And then the last thing is, at the end of the day, this is a recommending body. So, while the, quote, balance of power on that ethics board is 2 out of the 3, the council is what's going to ultimately making the decision on whether or not to do that public reprimand or not. And so that's up to us 5. Right, 5, yeah. So I feel like we might be kind of splitting hairs a little bit. And I don't know if it offers the relief if we keep that 3rd position vacated.
Oh, Councilman McCoy.
I'm on the same, I'm feeling the same wavelength as Matthew because of because it's in the ordinance, it's in the policy. It's also, I don't want to see this at a dead heat. It could be 2-0 either way, but if it's 2-0 either way with the other two people, it wouldn't necessarily matter. I would prefer to have it the way it is so we don't get locked in a dead heat. Do I have the same concerns Ms. Warmoth does? Absolutely. But I do think at this point in time, it would be better to have the three people so there is no tie there, and you know how I am with my numbers. I think it makes way more sense to have an odd number regardless of the balance of power, and as we have discussed over a lot today, that there's no teeth, and as Matthew said, at the end of the day, the decision lies with us.
If I can clarify, I mean, I think we all up here, I agree with Ms. Warmoth as well. I don't think it's a good ordinance. I think it needs to be improved. I think we all agree with that. I just think that from the effectiveness of it, yeah, and then I'm just repeating myself at this point,
But
so,
that's why I
yeah.
said if it's gonna keep the balance or whatever, then I'll go with the one. I rescind my no and say yes. I'll go with the vote. Well, I mean, when you do,
When
that
we
was
do.
just, we was talking
Right,
about it.
right.
And I was saying no when you first raised your hand, everybody raised their hand to me, so that's why I'm saying what I said. So when we do vote, I'll go with the number.
Somebody ready to call the question? There's no other discussion. We have a motion and we have a second. There's no further discussion, then.
Just as a
all-
reminder, the motion is to appoint Connie Flowers, right?
The
Such
motion is
recommendation.
to appoint the third person, and that would be Connie Flowers. All in favor? Any opposed?
That is unanimous.
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I have a
Oh,
real
yes.
quick question, I guess, for Kevin, if I could, at this point. So, just from where we go from here, can we answer that question?
Sure.
I mean, we have a board now, we have a complaint to be considered. What's the timeline?
I've asked the city clerk to get with the members, the two that were previously appointed and now the third, to see if they could find a time that works for them to meet in the next 2 weeks. What I see happening is an initial meeting just to explain the ordinance to them, they will have to review what they've received, and come up with a plan for how they actually want to hear and consider evidence. And then there'll be a hearing at some point where the person that made the complaint can testify and present evidence if they want to. The person that the complaint is made against can testify and present evidence if they want to. And then the council or this board would then make a recommendation. I think the ordinance says within 7 days of them having that proceeding.
So is there any subpoena power by this board to
They
compel
have the power
attendance of
to,
witnesses?
they have the power to conduct hearings. I don't think they have subpoena power.
Okay.
One of the things we're going to discuss and changes is adoption of civil rules of evidence and those type of things, because I think there needs to be some type of order to the presentation of a case.
So if your plan works out like you envision it, you would think maybe in May or June, something would be before the council to consider?
Within the next 60 days.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can just say, I really appreciate the moratorium that you brought before us, just giving us another option to just help relieve some of the concerns that we as an elected body had, as well as citizens. So just, thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned.